Hello! The aim of this video is to get us all thinking about how we can all overcome the potential impact that the pandemic has had on our youngest children over the last year. I don't want this video to be doom and gloom at all. I just want to raise awareness and to basically help us think about what potentially might happen over the years to come. None of us have been in this situation before as parents, teachers or practitioners, but we have to think about how children usually develop, the experiences they usually have, and how missing out on these things may impact on their learning. I've been thinking over the past couple of days about how best I can prepare for my reception class coming back to school in a couple of weeks. There are so many different things that I've thought of over the last few days, and I just wanted to raise those things with you so that as parents, teachers and practitioners, we're able to bear all of those things in mind. If we think about the reception cohort that we all currently have, when this whole pandemic started, they would have been 3 or 4 years old, and they've had a whole year of lockdown, not lockdown, but not normal life by any stretch of the imagination. So if we think about how far back those children remember, most of their memories will be of when they're 3. So will they remember going to a birthday party, playing party games? Possibly not. So we've got a reception cohort that are in school at the moment that may not know what it's like and what it feels like to be at a birthday party. We have a cohort of children that may not have had very many experiences of going to the supermarket with their parents, watching the interaction between mummy and the shop assistant, watching the interaction between dad and mum as they walk around the supermarket. We may have a cohort of children that don't know what happens in a shop, don't know how you buy food, may not remember how you stand in a queue and wait for your turn. These are all things that we need to bear in mind, and whilst they are really sad, it's been essential to keep everybody safe. But if we have these thoughts in our head, we can actually prioritise these experiences and these things to give children a kind of an opportunity to rehearse what that feels like. So having birthday parties in the classroom, role-playing, going to the shop, all of those things are really important for children to experience, not just for the social interaction element, but for their communication, their language and their understanding about how it's polite to queue and wait for your turn. You may have a reception cohort of children that don't remember or haven't been to a restaurant or a cafe and looked at a menu and chosen something and thought about how much it costs and waited for their food to arrive and had that experience of sharing a meal in a different environment other than home. Again, this is something that as practitioners and parents, if we bear all of that in mind, we can try and organise different ways that the children can experience something similar until life resumes. Now, as a family and a mum and a dad and a child and a brother and a sister, we all have our own way of communicating. And you don't necessarily make eye contact, and a child's speech may not be very clear to the outside world, whereas you as parents can understand everything they say. By having those social interactions as they walk down the street and bump into a neighbour and the neighbour asks them a question and they have to try and speak as clearly as they can, the children are rehearsing how to communicate with people who aren't in their family. The fact that we've been in this situation now for a year means that those children in reception, those preschoolers, will have missed out on interacting with people who aren't in their family, because we all know that we don't interact with our family in the same way we would interact with Fred, who lives across the road, or somebody you meet in the supermarket. These are all things we take for granted, but are really important in developing the children's skills in communicating with people who aren't in their family. Something I talk about very regularly is the importance of articulation and pronunciation and modelling how our mouths move. Again, when the children are with their mums and dads and family, their siblings, the way that you communicate with each other means that sometimes you don't actually look at each other when you're talking. Whereas when the children are at nursery or at school, adults are making a real effort to model how to move their mouth when they're pronouncing different words. The fact that some practitioners are wearing masks, rightly so, I'm not criticising, means that the children are not seeing this. Children pick up on everything, and even when you think they're not listening, they really are, particularly when you don't want them to. So think about those interactions that they haven't seen happening over the last year, of mum talking to her best friend, or dad talking to the neighbour on the street. The way you stop and listen to one another, you wait for them to finish their sentence and then you reply. All of this is modelling that the children pick up on and absorb like a sponge, but over the last year they will have missed out on those interactions. And whilst they may have seen some on Zoom, if they're anything like my children, they're not interested and run off after 2 minutes of saying hello to grandma. These are all things that we really need to bear in mind and plan for within our settings to make sure that we're compensating for that they've missed. Another area that I think we need to think about is the level of independence that those preschoolers starting in September will come to us with. It may not be that same level of independence that they would usually start school with. I know there are lots of preschool children who have continued to access their early years setting throughout this last lockdown, but there will be some children who won't. There will be some children who will have stayed at home. And when the children are at home, it goes without saying that parents will do more for them than they would if they were in nursery. It's really important that we get this message to parents that for children to start school independently in September, we need to get them putting on their own coats, getting dressed themselves, toileting themselves, washing their own hands. We need to make sure that these children don't miss out on the ability to develop those skills of independence. Now, I know lots of parents who have children starting school in September may feel really nervous about the fact that their children are starting school and they've missed out on so many of the things I've just mentioned. However, I want to probably alleviate those worries for people. I know lots of practitioners this year found that when the children started in September, far from being upset and nervous and anxious because they hadn't had their usual transition mornings or days, they actually came bounding in, more confident than I'd ever seen. Children are incredibly resilient and they actually surprise us all the time. So whilst I'm identifying that these issues may be a problem, the reality is we don't actually know what the children are going to encounter, but they are really important to bear in mind anyway. The children all started school really excited and eager to see friends and mix and socialise, despite the fact some had never met before. One thing I did notice that's different to previous years is their gross motor development and their ability to sit on the carpet and listen to a story without slouching. Now, I'm not one who has children sat on a carpet for long periods of time. I just mean listening to a story, but they would lean on the person next to them. And if you think about it, it's because they haven't developed that core strength. Swimming, parks, soft play, they were all closed during lockdown, so those children won't have had that gross motor exercise that they perhaps would have done in previous years. And we all know that gross motor development affects fine motor development, which then affects writing. So again, this is all something we just need to bear in mind and think about how we can support the children in developing those skills that they would have done if we weren't in this pandemic. Another thing that may be affected is children's listening skills. It's important we listen to stories read by other people, not just their teachers on online remote learning, but also listening to audiobooks. And I say audio because we absolutely need to get the children away from the screen as much as possible. And if they have an audiobook to listen to, they're not looking at the pictures, they're listening so intently that they're imagining those pictures in their head. So audiobooks are brilliant for developing listening skills. There are lots of audiobooks and recordings on BBC Radio. All of the things I've talked about and mentioned will affect their phonics, their reading and their writing. But more importantly, it will affect their ability to communicate. And children who struggle to communicate struggle to articulate their feelings and emotions. And at the forefront of all of our minds, particularly right now, is the children's well-being. I just want all of the children to be as happy as they possibly can be. The reality is we don't know how much of an impact this will have on the children and how long the impact will go on for. What we do know though is that some children will definitely not remember being in a zoo, going to a party, being at the library, going to the supermarket. So we have to bear that in mind. The usual experiences that some of these children will have had will not be in their memory, so they won't be able to refer to them. As I said at the beginning, I don't want to be doom and gloom. I just think forewarned is forearmed. So let's do the best we can for our children as parents, teachers and practitioners. I think it's really important that we get the message out there to parents, early years practitioners and teachers. So I'd be delighted if you shared this video so that people can really start thinking and preparing for how to overcome these potential developmental issues. We've got to be in it together to make sure that the children are at their happiest and reaching their full potential. I have lots more phonics videos on my YouTube channel, The Phonics Queen. I'm on Facebook, The Phonics Queen, and on Instagram, The Phonics Queen. I hope to see you all again soon.